Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who's joining us today. My name is Emilio Hernandez from CGAP, and we'll be starting our session to discuss the topic of impact of financial services on development outcomes. So we'll get straight to it. I'll give a little bit of an intro before I present my speakers today. So with multiple interlinked crises coming at the top of the development agenda globally, the financial inclusion community is really needing to understand better how, when, and for whom financial services bring well-being gains that actually translate into broader development outcomes. And I'm referring to things like enabling adaptation to and mitigation of climate change, promote women economic empowerment, or ensure food security, right? And I think the community has made important progress in the right direction, working with frameworks like financial health and very large exercise that takes stock on vast number of impact studies during the past 20 years. However, the reason we're having this session today is because we all feel really we're in a new momentum in the financial inclusion community that is enable us to take stock of new developments that move beyond the focus on those intermediate outcomes that are defined in frameworks such as financial health, like having enough savings or owning an insurance policy. And now we're able to leverage on a whole set of new technology that is allowing the industry stakeholders to do three things mainly. One is to collect data from customers that relate to the use of financial services, leading to broader development outcomes. Two, it's allowing us to improve our analytical methods, which in the past have been challenged to deal with the very large complexity of defining how this impact happens under different contexts. And lastly, we are being able to develop more evidence-based indicators of impact on development outcomes, which can be monitored more pragmatically, right? So this is really the focus of current work among various actors in the financial inclusion community, including CGAP. And this session really is aimed at sharing these initiatives. So with me today, I'm delighted to have a chance to chat with distinguished members of this financial inclusion community. So with me, I have Anaï Tevosyan, who is Director of Research at FINCA International, and Arturo Franco, who's Senior Vice President of Thought Leadership at Mastercard Centre for Inclusive Growth. So welcome, delighted to have you here. So allow me to start this conversation with some questions. For example, from FINCA's and the Center of Inclusive Growth perspectives, what explained this renewed drive to tackle knowledge gaps on how financial inclusion enable development outcomes? Maybe we'll start with you, Anaï.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for this kind invitation to be part of this esteemed panel. And I appreciate the opportunity to share insights and ideas with our audience today. And thank you for the questions, Emilio. I want to start with the fact that FINCA is reaching its 40th anniversary next year. And our strategy is to solidify our legacy by using the knowledge we've gathered over the years to meet the needs of today. And it's actually fascinating to observe the movements of knowledge accumulation, retention, and usage that is happening in an extremely fast pace, and particularly due to the technological advancements. And it seems like the knowledge is building up every hour. For FINCA, these advancements in knowledge growth have highlighted one very important point: the greater role of data in connecting us more directly with our customers. At the same time, we see globally, severe food security issues, slower poverty reduction, and most notably, slower recovery due to climate change. The same we see in our data. The Mission Monitor surveys show significant post-COVID deterioration of financial health and resilience, particularly among the most vulnerable segments. And in fact, one of our recent studies using ML classification algorithms show a huge heterogeneity among food insecure households. And particularly the self-employed women with less than secondary education and 4 and more children at the highest risk of experiencing food insecurity. So the situation and our mandate in this case does change. It's clear that offering general access or like generalized services is no longer sufficient for this group of people. And with the depth of knowledge, we now develop solutions that are specifically tailored for each segment. And the vulnerabilities of our clients particularly require a very careful profiling and reaching out with solutions that meet their needs with highest precision and accuracy, and not approximately anymore, so that they can get the expected utilities from our services to be able to use their human potential fully.
Mm-hmm. So it's really FINCA's that firm commitment to enable development outcomes at the customer level that's driving your efforts in achieving that. Thank you. Exactly. Arturo, how about from the Center of Inclusive Growth perspective?
Thank you, Emilio. Also, thank you to everyone for having us here in this very important conversation. We're not turning 40 years like FINCA, congratulations, by the way, but next year, the Center for Inclusive Growth is turning 10 years. And if there's been a constant in our approach so far, it must be the fact that at the core of everything we do is a drive for more knowledge and data. So we invest in research, we apply our own data, we share our data, we partner with experts in the field. And so in some ways, this is not a new drive for us. I think as a technology company in the global payments industry, financial inclusion has always been very material to us because of the products and services that we provide around the world. It is at the intersection of where our expertise lies and where we think we can have the most social impact. So I think from a ESG governance perspective, our board, our shareholders, our customers have always cared about financial inclusion, and they have been pushing us to better understand the impact of the work that we do. And we've done a lot around this in the last few years. But we're also part of a bigger industry, right? We're part of the financial sector in many ways. And so we also work with our clients and our partners across the industry to move from this notion of measuring access, as CGAP has said, to usage, to hopefully measuring the impact of financial inclusion. So last year, for example, we worked with the UN SGSA and our friends at the Financial Health Network on a survey of financial institutions. I think there were around 15 or 20 from around the world to test their appetite for building a knowledge platform around developmental impacts of financial inclusion. And we found very strong interest. And so, across the 10 years that we've been working in the space, we're absolutely certain that we need to get to a clear set of metrics about financial well-being that go beyond access, that go beyond uptake and usage, that really understand how these tools and services affect people's lives. And for Mastercard, this is not philanthropy. This is something we call commercially sustainable social impact, because we cannot succeed as a company in this space if people are not succeeding themselves. Absolutely.
So there's this drive of, that you as a company, you'll do good if you do well, right? It's kind of like that drive, that motivation. Excellent. So, okay, so we accept that there's this new momentum and there's this new drive because we see a growing need to understand our impact on development outcomes. But this is something that's not necessarily new. Maybe many of our audiences have been hearing the topic of impact in our community for many, many years. But what are some of the new tools, data, methods developed in recent years that you think make it viable to address the highly complex nature of these persistent knowledge gaps? What would you say has changed recently that allows us to take a new stab at the issue? Anaid.
Thanks, Arturo. Very interesting question. So, taking into consideration our new mandate and the fact that we need to constantly build and maintain in-depth understanding of the real life circumstances of millions of people that we serve, this really requires maximum flexibility, speed, versatility of both methods and metrics. For example, experimental studies, although being the gold standard, sometimes are just focused on particular set of indicators or take longer time and sometimes just not practical to implement when we need to really learn and meet needs. In other times, we need to hear deeper with qualitative methods, which are extremely important tools when we need to learn about the local context on the ground circumstances of our clients. And these tools pair up with other quantitative research methods are amazingly functional and irreplaceable. Also when dealing with sensitive topics or we're working with marginalized groups and are able to actually surface so many nuanced measures and indicators that we need to consider in our work. But also, and most importantly, I want to emphasize the importance of applying ML AI on available data sets, especially pooled data sets, huge transactional data, accumulated knowledge, of course, with ethical principles such as fairness, inclusiveness, transparency. So for example, our recent usage of neural nets on transactional data revealed 6 hidden factors or indicators of account dormancy, which we then identified through a follow-up qualitative study. These techniques work particularly well when it is difficult for us to come up with predefined causal hypotheses, right? So, or in cases where a particular measure can be an outcome and at the same time a prior condition. I just want to illustrate this with a very concrete example from one of our recent studies on women's economic empowerment and savings. In some families, our women needed greater independence to become better savers. In other families, greater independence, actually the savings were needed for women to become more independent. And in a third group of families, that independence, the greater financial independence, hindered any type of meaningful savings because of many financial responsibilities put entirely on those women. In such cases, the standard estimation methods of causal inferences do not work well. And this is where the recent advancements in data modeling can really improve the explorations of such complex interactions. Also, sometimes, natural experiments, quasi-experimental approaches work faster and in a sense better with like difference in difference, instrumental variables, causal mediation analysis. And they can be very helpful in providing quicker, quicker estimates of causal inferences about our programs. And last but not least, I want to emphasize the need to consider macroeconomic and general equilibrium effects when particularly drawing conclusion about our role in economy overall and the changes that the financial organizations create in longer and like broader terms.
Yeah, so just to try and highlight, you mentioned the availability of new data and breaking of data silos in a way from that contain outcomes indicators or variables. You mentioned new methods like ML, AI, and others that deal with the highly complexity of controlling for the many contexts that can influence the impact of financial services. And you mentioned very interestingly the interlinkage between individual outcomes and then societal outcomes through general equilibrium effects that are very important to understand, impacts on development outcomes overall. Thank you. Arturo, what about from your perspective? What are some of the new tools, data, and methods that are very promising?
Yeah. So look, when I think about how I apply data to measure my own kind of personal health, it's good practice to have an annual checkup, right? And that gives you a very general sense of where you are. If there is an issue, it is good practice to go very deep, and that would be kind of like an RCT on your, on your veins or your heart or your cholesterol or something like that. And then there's what you do in the time in between, right? And you have either a scale or one of these like fancy things here that's giving you kind of constant data on different levels of things. And I think this applies to the financial inclusion field as well. You can't, we all rely heavily on the Findex, and Laura Clapper does an amazing job at creating, representative data, but it takes 2-3 years at a time, right? And so that's like your annual checkup. You can't just do that. There's 12 years, as you said at the beginning, of really, really deep work on specific products in specific contexts with specific segments of society. We have a beautiful mosaic of that, but we can't extrapolate too much from those. We need something in between, something that connects the two. And I think as finance becomes more digital, we are already seeing that we can have this kind of continuous stream of data if we do it in a safe way, as Mastercard does it, with aggregation and anonymity and everything that is required, but it will allow us to see a fuller picture. So I think there's no either or, it's a combination of all of these data methods and tools. And I think going forward, we can move from discrete measures to more continuous measures. We can move from survey-based to more user-generated data, and it will create, a better, a more collaborative way of understanding where people's financial lives are.
So I see a common thread between your comment, Arturo, and Ahit's in the sense that, we are, by being able to generate more continuous data, more real-time data on better type of variables, outcome-related variables that our customers or communities face, we're and leveraging on new, analytical methods, we are able to answer some of these questions. But the process of it is around, that you're implying, is around merging data from different sources, right? And using a multiplicity of methods to analyze them. That requires collaboration, right? That requires breaking data silos, people sharing data. That, as we all know, is not an easy process. So perhaps as we move towards the last point of our conversation is, can you each give us one example of the type of collaboration that you think we need to realize this merger of data and capacities that are clearly needed if we're going to be able to answer the complex questions that we're trying to address, like what's the impact of financial services on climate change, on women, economic empowerment, food security. So if you could focus on one example that can illustrate what we need, what does it take to make this collaboration possible? And I maybe start with you.
Sure. So we actually recently partnered with Amazon Web Services to modernize our data systems, break our data silos. And because of those technological advancements offered by the tech companies, the entire collect, analyze, and engage chain is becoming much more client-centric, making it possible to analyze much more deeper and reveal these complex relationships, non-linear, and further enhance our ability to respond to our clients' diverse needs and meet them where they are. This eventually what is needed, and we believe that we are getting there, that we get what we need to ensure higher utility for our clients from our services. And I want to bring just two short examples on our particular cases. So our research team collects millions of primary data points from underserved communities, merging with external data, huge transactional data. And we currently experiment with various AI solutions to create better and faster data quality tracking systems to eventually eliminate various biases from our data. So the data collection platform integrated with like cloud environment allow expansion of data quality checks, giving much higher importance, and just the availability of the analytical packages. It's now possible to really work with metadata. Let's say do metadata analysis, rapid text, image, audio audits, which produce better data for faster and most precise decision making. And then another point is that the cloud services and cloud computing in general give immense benefits and flexibilities in a way we previously imagined data merging and analyzing in general. These services are immediately and almost infinitely scalable. And our recent Mission Monitor dashboard is a good testament of how data from various sources such as poverty, income, general population, demographic data from the World Bank or other sources can be fused immediately with like a couple of survey data sets put into very, very user-friendly and digestible visuals to tell a compelling story for our clients. Their general environment, their needs. Also, those, AI ML solutions that come with these services sometimes and usually always question our linear thinking and allow to extract previously unthinkable, much more complex relationships and patterns from various data types and data sources.
So, and who were the stakeholders that are implied in this collaboration that you're mentioning beyond FINCA? Who do you work with?
So Amazon Web Services, we also have a tech partner that we work with. They help with like breaking those silos in a way that they construct our data platforms and just modernize the system in general. And, also just research, right? So like trying to make sure that the primary data sources are correctly matched with the external data that makes sense to tell a very complete story for our clients' needs, their environments, and their eventually, that's what we need to understand their needs and to meet where they are to make sure we maximize the utility they get from our services.
Yeah, that's fantastic work. Thanks. Arturo, what about from the center's experience?
Yeah, I think there's so many examples of kind of researchers, data providers, data users collaborating in this space. Some of them are kind of global or international, like what 60 Decibels did with the microfinance industry, which I thought was a brilliant use of resources to take a pulse on customer satisfaction there. Some of them are within countries. Mercado Libre has been creating really interesting studies using their own data. Or in the US, for example, we have been with the Aspen Institute leading a massive platform around building a more inclusive financial system that has led to all kinds of sharing and collaboration opportunities on measurement. But the example I want to use is it's another analogy from the space or the world of pandemic prevention. So the Rockefeller Foundation and the Center for Inclusive Growth created an organization called data.org. Data.org's mission is to reduce the gap in the application of data science, as Anit was really talking about, in the social sector. So we want to build the capacity of the social sector to use ML, AI, all of these new tools. And so what data.org did in pandemic prevention is that it created a platform called the Epiverse that sets basic protocols and standards for the world to be able to share pandemic prevention data. And so they built the basic infrastructure, and it's been working really well. So this year we've asked data.org to explore the kind of the idea of creating a similar platform for the financial inclusion space. So the working title is the FinVerse, and they are starting to work to replicate the process with financial inclusion institutions to create a baseline of data and a few kind of templates for data sharing and protocols. So by early next year, we think we'll have a clearer picture of how feasible this is. But that's, I think, an example of what I said before, private sector institutions in the space care about the developmental impacts or the personal individual impacts and outcomes of their work on financial inclusion, but they might not have the tools or the place to bring their own data. So we're trying to create this infrastructure, and we're obviously open to partner with everyone. And so that would be my example of collaboration.
Great example. And the type of organizations that are invited to share the data are financial institutions. What are you envisioning? Only
so I think, as I said before, what we need is really a combination of all kinds of data, survey data, coming from researchers all the way to our CTs, and a way to kind of map it. And the analogy I used was just how you map your own health data. We should be able to map the world's financial health data, right? And so I don't think there is any restriction on what kind of data could be useful, right? As long as it's safe and we understand what is in there. So I think data.org is looking at it from a very wide aperture and trying to really explore where we can get to.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation. I think we do have some time for questions and comments from the audience, and I see some are coming in. Maybe I just read them out and can answer some of them. So first question from Gada says, if financial inclusion is being treated as an input, not an outcome, what metrics can we track beyond subjective well-being? I guess the question is going out, what are those variables that we really want to focus on that give us an indication of we're having an impact on development outcomes? Maybe we start with you, Anna, since you're directly in touch with your customers.
Sure. Thank you for the questions, Gada. Well, first of all, a couple of indicators there, just directly related to the needs of our customers, whether we cover those needs, first of all, at what level we cover their needs, whether we, first of all, understand what the concrete needs they have, right? So I think that matching is very important, just to match our services or understand their needs much, much better, the in-depth, so that we can create those very fine lines between us and customers to make sure that they get the utility they expect from our services. I think that's, first of all, I would prioritize that one. And also whether they feel empowered, whether our services help them unleash their human potential, whether they feel better, their life, the quality of their life, how they assess, right? So like working with us, whether they feel the improvement. Of course, I mean, it's challenging to really track the quality of life improvements. Like we do need longer term surveys and RCTs, etc. But those, measures that we can implement meanwhile, I think are important for us, first of all, to understand where we are vis-a-vis the needs of our clients, and then whether we make them happy with what we provide.
Great, thank you. And maybe last question for you, Arturo. We have about 2 minutes left. Miles asks, can you provide some examples of bias in data? This exercise that you were doing. Is there a risk of our understanding being biased, given that the data that we have may come biased? How would you answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are several levels to answer the question. One is if from a societal perspective, right? We know that data is only as good as where it comes from, and if you're trying to make observations on people who are excluded, using data of those who are included, you obviously have a little problem there, right? And so we always need to really question where is this data coming from and what is it telling us about those that we can't see. I think there's also a statistical answer to that, and I leave that to the experts, right? But as I said, as the financial industry moves into more and more digital products and services, and we create more and more data that is based on the behavior of the users, right? There's both a blessing and a curse, right? The blessing is we don't have to go and do a survey. We can see what they're doing, right? And that can be very, very interesting. But the curse is we can't just rely on those observations because there's a lot around that we can't see. So that would be, it's a very generic response, but we do a lot of work with a lot of partners around the world, including FinReg Lab and other organizations that are going very deep into algorithmic bias.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Yes, it's a real issue. Well, that's all we have time for. I'd like to thank Arturo and Anahit for their participation. Thank you so much for this really engaging conversation. And I'd like to thank all participants for joining us and the questions that you've sent. With that, I'll invite you to continue the Financial Inclusion Week agenda. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.